name is Amir JAHANGUIRI. I'm here to moderate a discussion on what we've entitled Crossroads of Transformational Infrastructure Development, with two panelists of prestige, Mrs. Françoise LOMBARD, CEO of Proparco, Proparco is a subsidiary of the French Agence Française de Développement, and whose interventions are to strengthen the private sector, mainly through debt, but also through equity, technical assistance, and guarantees. And the actions of Proparco are focused on three impact objectives of sustainable and resilient economy, protecting the planet, and reducing inequalities. Thank you. Mr. Thierry, CEO of Meridiam, who was also the founder of Meridiam 20 years ago. Meridiam recruits specialists of transformational infrastructure development, dedicated to helping make the UN Sustainable Development Goals happen. In 2019, Meridiam became one of the French companies to adopt France's new mission-driven benefit corporation, Société à Mission status. This status allows companies to include social and environmental objectives in their goals. As an asset manager, Meridiam currently manages 130 assets around the world, focused on critical public services, sustainable mobility, and innovative low-carbon solutions. Thank you, Thierry. I just thought, as a reminder, because I've already mentioned them, what UN Sustainable Development Goals were. So just as a very brief introduction, these Sustainable Development Goals were adopted by the UN in 2015, and they comprise 17 targets, which are, I'm not going to go through the whole 17, otherwise I'll take too much of our time. Elimination of poverty, elimination of hunger, quality education, gender equality, infrastructure, reduced inequalities, and climate action. So it's very important, it's a core of our topic of today to have these in mind when we're discussing this. The panel is going to mainly focus on the development of infrastructure in the emerging markets in order to meet the goals that I've just referred to. Interestingly, this dialogue is going to be between two panelists from the public and the private sector, but from a public sector approach which is very private, and from a private sector approach which looks at public benefit goals constantly and all the time. The first question I'd like to ask, and the general theme of the first question I'd like to raise with the panelists, is whether, what makes you different from your peers? And why is it so important to be involved in the emerging markets and infrastructure development projects? Françoise, do you want to start?
Thank you, and thank you for the invitation. I'm quite pleased to sit next to Thierry to speak about what we are doing together, and more broadly about infrastructure in emerging and developing economies. So why is it important? First question. So at Proparco, we approved last year around, I would say, close to 700 million euros of new financing in the infra space, be it water and sanitation, renewable energy, digital infrastructure, transportation. It was a record high, and at AFD level, so with our mother company, it's around 5 billion euros of new financing each year about financing infrastructure in developing and emerging economies. So it has always been a core priority for AFD Group because it's not only crucial to achieve clean energy transitions, but it is also key to, of course, give access to people to basic services. It is key to achieve a certain number of SDGs you have mentioned. It is key also just to allow economies to grow and thrive. And as the French Ministry of Finance has mentioned this morning, it is key to achieve sovereignty, resilience, and competition. So, second question, How and why is Proparco a bit different from our peers? So Proparco brings concessional financing to a certain extent, long-term financing. We bring ENS expertise, requirement about adaptation, sustainable infrastructures, but it's not so much different from what our peers are doing. So I will insist more on 2 points. First, our ability to work at the group level with our mother company, AFD. This is really key because you need, of course, a structure to lead the policy dialogue, of course, to have big, large-scale projects emerge with Expertise France to have strong regulatory frameworks, and Proparco positioning itself a bit more downstream in the process, for instance, to finance the SPV when it comes to project finance when it is set out. And second point is about our ability to bring other partners around the table, for instance, European development finance institutions, without adding new complexity.
Okay.
I think two reasons. I think and happy to be here today. The first, I think, Françoise, we share the same. How do we deliver sustainable development goals? And principally, it will be in the emerging markets. And the second is one, if you consider the sort of OECD plan projections on which regions will contribute the most to growth in 2100, then you find Africa, you find South Asia, and a lot of emerging markets. And clearly for us, it is also taking this opportunity and taking the time now to actually build the infrastructure that will support this growth, but also making sure that we create a market that brings liquidity, brings all the things that we find in developed market today. But this is a time now to invest in those markets to take the growth opportunity ahead of time.
Moving on to what I would consider a theme of European and French approach to the development of infrastructure in the economies of transition. What are the tools that you deploy? What is your outlook, and how are we to enhance the frameworks, including regulatory frameworks, risk allocation, and governance of these projects? What solutions do you have in mind in terms of reinforcing the capability of emerging markets to develop sustainable, transformational infrastructure? Thierry, maybe you want to start on this one.
I mean, quite a number of things, but perhaps starting from the big picture, it's the approach of you call it Team France or Team Europe, which both includes public and private parties, to really establish partnerships with those countries. A number of sort of political signals of that is the global gateway, but this is the approach that I think France had for about a decade in terms of how to promote development and at the same time create this sort of economically sustainable partnerships. So that includes obviously bringing people like us together in there, but also developing the ecosystem of capacity on the side of the private sector. I mean, part of it is also, Proparco would love many more Meridiams from France or the rest of Europe to come and participate in this action, but also on the public sector sides with all the support. Françoise mentioned France Expertise and the support of AFD on the upstream, but also the initiative that we have with the African Infrastructure Fellowship Program to support government in terms of their capacity to develop projects and negotiate complex contract with that. So a lot of it at the end of the day is about creating that capacity and creating that partnership of trust that allows investment to flow one way to develop this sustainable. And that doesn't mean that they need to be exclusive with partnerships. There are countries may have other partnerships, but we need to find partnerships that are benefiting from both sides. And I think that's where the approach is pretty clear. And ending a bit with Global Gateway, I think the signal is very good. I think two conditions for success, having spent 2 years with the Commission on this topic. One is a clearly identified pocket of money in the next MFF, otherwise nothing will happen, the multi-financial framework of the EU. And then the second is using agents, operators on the ground, just like Proparco, the European Investment Bank, to actually deploy faster, because they can use this limited amount of money and leverage it to reduce risk, to bring concessionality, to do quite a lot of things, including supporting project preparation. So clearly that could be a powerful instrument as long as we have the right people to deploy it.
Yes, I mean, in the infra space, you definitely need to have a close collaboration between public and private. This is the way it has worked in developed economies, and of course, it is the way it will work in emerging and developing economies. So this is what we are doing together, because this is not only about, when we consider the water sector or the energy sector, this is not about only adding new capacity, but this is really about having a coherent and a sustainable ecosystem. For instance, reducing losses, having enabling environment, setting fair prices as well for energy, for water. So this is not just about financing. Financing is key. This is what we bring, but it is a bit more than that. And this is what those partnerships between public and private allow.
May I ask, what is your appraisal and your views on the current decline of American multilateralism in the development of infrastructure in these emerging markets? Is that a reality, or is that a perception?
Yeah, I think the impact is slightly different, because I think the headlines show withdrawal from USAID, from a number of things. I mean, the reality is the powerful force of DFC is still very much involved with the same ESG constraints that everybody else, and very active on those markets, but perhaps with a more transactional and more focused approach. You could see the US partnering with the EU on the LOMBARD corridor. Of course, there is a critical material issue at the back of it, so that is an interest for the US. But you can also see the US DFC supporting heavily the national conveyor in Jordan with all of us, because it's strategic for the US to support Jordan. So it's perhaps more focused, more transactional, but in a way it has increased in terms of capacity, but very much focused.
If I may, I think there is no real hostility to everything when it comes to the US position, but real opportunism to everything. We will see what direction our US peer, US Development Finance Corporation, DFC, will go through reorganization. But there is no evidence at all that there will be a decrease in financing. Actually, probably the other way around. Probably not under a climate label, for instance, and with a more transactional approach, with clear American and foreign policy interests. But I don't really see in the infra space a decrease.
Thierry, you mentioned the Global Gateway, which, just for everyone's interest, I'm reminding, is the EU strategy to invest 300 billion euros in infra between 2021 and 27, half of which would be dedicated to Africa for green transition, digital transformation, sustainable economic growth, and health and education projects. That's obviously a tool to fill the gap. Is that sufficient? Are capital initiatives of this nature sufficient, or are we to worry more about bankability of the projects, or at least the perception of bankability of the projects? Because sometimes also what I, as a practitioner, realize is people have preconceived views of bankability. If specific countries are just no-goes. So I'd like to hear your views on that.
Somehow it is sufficient because that's all you're going to get anyway. The reality is, I mean, globally, most developed economies have less and less funds to dedicate to these. So the best use of it makes it sufficient is how much can they leverage it through the various operators, through the private sector, to basically, if with a few million, as they've done in the Dakar BRT, they can make a 100 million project possible, then we're fine with that. And this is the best way of utilizing this sort of money. But it's clearly not the issue, the capital. The issue is the bankability. The issue is the ecosystem around the project. And that's why I was mentioning all the capacity building that needs to be done on both sides, not just the public, but to be able to have proper contractual relationship that allows capital to be, but all the tools that would de-risk, you take Global Gateway, but you can also take MIGA, you can take a number of tools like this, will help, definitely. But capacity and project bankability and preparation is probably the biggest bottleneck.
Yes, I mean, we need concessional financing to bridge the gap, of course, and we need some public resources to keep on supporting some developers like Meridiam, of course, but this is not the only thing that is necessary in the big picture. So working upstream on capacity building, supporting some initiatives like, for instance, the Alliance for Green Infrastructure in Africa, to have more bankable projects, also addressing some major bottlenecks, for instance, the lack of secondary markets, at least in Africa. It's not the case probably in other emerging economies. Working on that is really key. So this is not all about concessional financing and about improving the bankability of the project. Also, of course, it's needed as well.
Thank you. I see that, you know, we're on a speed dating format here, so we have to do this really quickly. So as I alluded to speed dating, can I actually say and ask if there's a Meridiam Proparco partnership or duo or a couple in place for PPPs in the emerging market?
I mean, definitely we work a lot together. It's not exclusive, but over the past 10, 12 years, I mean, and we collaborate a lot upstream to really identify the joint opportunity. And from a Meridiam perspective, we appreciate it because, I mean, Proparco also relies on a very extensive network of offices of the EFD and their own, and have often a better knowledge than some other multilateral may not have, and makes them a lot more relevant when it comes to specifically dealing with issues, not just ESG, but a number of issues in terms of understanding, you know, creditworthiness of a country, of a public client. So that's why I think it's a very beneficial. And we're also very much supporting Proparco because this approach, we think, should take the lead over some more bureaucratic over multilateral, but those who know that I call them bureaucratic, I don't need to name them because I tell them directly. So they usually have 3 letters, so you can guess. But no, that's what I like about this relationship.
Thank you very much, Thierry. And of course, it's a long story, a story of trust. I think we have more than 20 debt projects together. We are investor in your African, your funds dedicated to Africa. And we are also investing alongside you in equity, for instance, in Kenya. So it's a very long-standing story now. And I just want to say that because I tried to say why Proparco was a bit different from its peers, but I think there is no other Meridiam really, because usually regarding infrastructure asset managers, you have those who are acting in developed economies and sometimes diversifying in Latin America and Asia. But I think Meridiam is the only non-African infrastructure asset manager with an approach dedicated to Africa, and it's really precious for Proparco. Thank you.
Thank you. Join me in thanking Françoise and Thierry.